So assuming everyone's in the right room, we're going to talk about incidents, a bit about incident management, and then we're going to go through how that incident management at a company I was with was then used to handle the CrowdStrike incident, which is about 2 years ago. Anyone remember CrowdStrike? Yeah, good, which is probably why you're here. You know. So what's my background? Because developer wrangler doesn't really say much. I was head of engineering at a FX payments company called Free Market FX. That's where this incident timeline comes from. For 5.5 years, we're regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the finance regulator in the UK, and the Central Bank of Ireland in the EU. So those were the people we had to answer to, as well as our customers and shareholders and all the other things that you have to do. I'm now working for Clearbank as a contractor, helping them harden up disaster recovery. So that's quite a fun task, actually. I'm quite enjoying that. So first of all, was anyone at a talk I said about how to handle incidents about 3 years ago here? Good, good, that's good. Because that means I'm not going to repeat slides that you've already seen. Oops. So, the reason these slide decks look a bit funny is because they were based on the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. Because I stupidly gave my previous talk the name A Curious Incident in Your Software in the Daytime, which is the most convoluted title I've ever given a talk, and I will never do something as stupid as that again. At least the people who turned up to that talk got a free book. There were 10, 20 books given away. So what is an incident? So we have to start from what do we consider to be an incident? And it really is anything that can impact the service you're providing to your customers or internally, and it could have regulators as well. So whether that's the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK, who deal with GDPR and the Data Protection Act, or it could be finance regulators. If you're in the US, you've got controls over health data and all sorts of things that you are beholden to. And there's reputational impacts. You really don't want to have it known that your software is flaky or it's leaking customer data or doing the wrong payments. All sorts of things like that. So why do you care? Point is, everyone will say, we've got firewalls, we've got malware protection, email scanning, redundancy, massively scaled, cloud services, multiple... All of this is fine, and it will help you, but at some point, something will go wrong. One of the things that will go wrong is, who's software developers here? Ever released a bug into live and then had to fix it? That doesn't matter how many firewalls or what malware protection you've got. If you do that, that's on you to fix and get fixed as fast as possible. That would still be an incident. So, key bit about incidents, I think, is you have to have a plan. That's the first step, is something written down that says what happens, who do you talk to, all that kind of thing. Every time I look at this, it looks like I've written it wrong and it should be plan A, right? Believe me, if you've got a plan A and no plan B or C, that's still good because you've got a plan, right? Don't care. It's when you don't have a plan, you're going to be in trouble because no one will know what they're meant to be doing. And it means you can organize people. They already know where to go to get information. They already know where to talk about things. They have an idea of what they're meant to be doing. Not only that, you know who you're meant to talk to. So now, there's no worrying about where's Bob's mobile number or anything. We need to talk to Bob. Bob will have put his mobile number somewhere because you've told him to, because he's part of the incident team if we ever have incidents. And something you can tell your customers. This is really important because what you don't want, and it's really hard as developers, right? If you're a developer providing a system for customers, and especially if you're providing an API to other developers, when something goes wrong, you'd like to just chat to them about, oh, we're dealing with it, we think it's this, we think it's... That's not really a great thing for developers to be doing, because what they need to be doing is fixing stuff. So you really want to have in advance the kind of information you would tell a third party. What would you tell a customer? Don't let it be the responsibility of the developer to decide what to disclose, what information to give away. I think I missaid this at one of my talks and said, you've kind of got to lie. I didn't mean lie. I meant you just don't have to tell the whole truth, partly because what you know in the first half hour of an incident may not be true. It may not be what's happening. So telling someone, by the way, our database went offline when it didn't, it's something else that actually impacted. You really don't want to start saying things that didn't happen because then it gets hard to retract. And you need a good enough record to write it up afterwards, because if you have a regulator, they'll want to know about it afterwards. Your customers would love to know about it afterwards as well. So they would like to find out what happened. You know, and what you're doing to make sure it doesn't happen again, probably. What constitutes an incident? Loads of stuff. Someone stealing the data. Often external, but it could easily be, if anyone's had salespeople in their companies, salespeople have a nasty habit of downloading the entire customer list before they leave. It's something they kind of do, and you can have systems flagged to say someone's absolutely mullering the CRM database. But also unauthorized use of systems for processing data. That's one of the other ones. Third-party services, you've got some CDN that's got JavaScript in it, it gets hacked, gets malicious code put in it, which ends up with your system being disrupted. Maybe it's got a denial of service attack. Something that really makes all the customers have a problem. Key bit that, if only one customer kind of has a problem, it's not necessarily an incident. It might be a configuration of their customer, their account, how they're using it. It's when it starts to affect lots of customers, lots of transactions in the finance world that you start getting worried. Or it's really having problems with key functions, key bits of the system, which maybe the customers don't know about, but you know these things are happening in the background and you're quite concerned. An A plan is not for creating a pretty PDF. So I don't advocate having a plan just so you can give it to a regulator, because that's meaningless, right? No one wants to write these documents in order for them never to be seen by anyone but regulators or governance committees. You want to rehearse it. So one of the things, if anyone here ever used to back up to tapes, one of the things that used to happen, and one of the things you used to back up was to something called a DAT tape. So they went and used digital audio cassettes, in effectively digital audio tapes, a format that should never have been used for data to store data, because it was cheap hardware at the time. The problem with those were, eventually the heads on the tape would go out of alignment. So the only drive that could ever read your backup was probably the drive it was written on, which if it's in the building that went on fire means you can't restore from your backup, right? So one of the things in the old days was, unless you've restored from a backup, one, you don't know you can read it. Two, you don't know if you've stored the right things in there. You might have not backed up everything you need. So unless you rehearse this, you really don't know if your plan's going to work. And it's an entire process. You will probably, if you're in an IT side of the world, get told incidents are about disaster recovery and resilience and having a data center go down or something like that. It's also about what if we don't have access to this system? Could we carry on working? Do we have to prioritize customers? And then it becomes a business function that needs to be tested as well. Not just whether the IT survives, but a third-party supplier like a compliance that checks whether payments are fraudulent and knows it against dodgy people in the world who might be trying to move money. If you can't access that, you're not meant to move the money. So you might have to manually do checks, and you're only going to do those on high-value payments for certain customers. So therefore, you've got to work out what the business process would be. How many would you be able to cope with? All that kind of stuff. And you can do this as a paper exercise. And you test different scenarios regularly. If you are, I was going to say lucky enough to have some real incidents. If you don't have real incidents, I don't know which company you're working in, because you should be having some, but you use the rehearsals to do the ones that haven't happened to you already in real life. So, is it an incident now? So one of the interesting bits is I'm of the belief that anyone in a company should be able to say, I think there's an incident. Right? And it's better to have too many of them and then say, no, it wasn't, than to have someone go, I'm not sure, so I'm not going to report it. So early notification is much more important. And just because someone says, I think there's an incident, doesn't mean it is. Someone will later decide whether it's an incident. In the financial services sector, one of the things you do is you have to work out how many customers were affected, how much payments were affected, and then it becomes levels of incident, and it dictates how you've got to report to a regulator. So you definitely don't want everything being an incident because you're going to have to tell someone about it if that was the case. So you're only going to tell people about the really important ones. And make it easy. The first incident reporting template I got at Free Market was created by an external Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, and it was 6 pages of Word as a form, paper form that you would kind of fill out. And I went, no one's going to do that. So make it easy. So we actually made it easy, and we've made it 3 things you need to put into Slack and you're done. The other one is get those prepared email and social media templates ready. So have something that you could push to your customers saying, our service is not working at the moment, we're looking at it, our service is fixed, and our service is currently being repaired, and then minimal information. Have that all ready. And that means your sales guys and your legal team have cleared them, so that you're not going to say anything stupid. Oh, and if you're a developer, you don't send that out. You leave it to marketing or PR to send out. Don't ever send it out yourself if you're in a big enough company. So here's an example. So we had that Word document. We were trying to get another way of reporting incidents. We were struggling as an IT side of the business, engineering. We were a third of the company. To have the board consider it, or the rest of the company consider it important about how we handled incidents. And then we had a sales guy came in called Matt. Matt said, I've been places before. It's really important we have something to report incidents so we can report back to customers because it makes our customers happy and it makes them want to stay with us. It makes them carry on trading with us. So he wrote the workflow, first workflow in Slack. He worked out how to do it in Slack and said, we did it like this in the previous company. And all you did, it's moved, by the way. Slack decided to move this from a really easy place to something top left on a menu that is harder to find now. But all we had was anyone could report an incident, and all they said was, is it slow? Do you think it's malicious? All sorts of things. There's about 5 types of incidents. They write something, say how urgent it is, write something else. That's it, 4 bits of information. And what you end up with is this appearing in the general channel and also in an incident channel in Slack so that everyone can see it. It also tells you to email this to this email address because Slack was designed to replace email, and they refused to send emails from workflows in Slack because you shouldn't be using email. Right? They're very dogmatic about it, so we did that as well. For someone, this is quite a relevant comment here, in any incident plan, what if Slack goes down and that's the incident you're suffering from? And our comment on that was use Teams. That's it, right? We had Teams and Slack. So if Slack's down, use Teams. If Teams is down, you'll be using Slack anyway. So that's how you deal with that, which is a really valid point because we were using Slack to deliver notifications of payments to customers. So if Slack went down, customers lost their confirmation of transactions, although they had emails, they'd have to fall back to emails. And also, we had financial figures in a private Slack channel telling us throughput and all sorts of vital information. So actually, Slack going down was an incident if it happened, and it did happen occasionally. So, but the whole aim of whether it's Slack or whether it's Teams is get everyone together. So have a single channel that the whole company can natter in. That's fine. But if you're going to talk technical, technical channel with a limited number of people in. So in the old days, clearly, you were all in an office together. And there was one point where, at Huddle, I was working with system engineers. We're trying to fix a mirror problem between our main SQL servers. And it was our live service in the UK, quite important. And I was on the phone to the CTO. And basically, I just looked at them, looked at their faces to see whether how it was going. And they're going, and didn't ask them a question because I was leaving them to it. And that's what this channel's about. It's leave the developers to do their work and just have one person who talks to the rest of the company. So no one's trying to get to every developer to find out what's happening. And you tell everyone that. This is because you have the plan. You've told everyone this is the person everyone talks to. Don't talk to the developers directly. The commercial and legal may also have that because the last thing you want in this whole company channel is confidential information possibly leaking into that. So if it starts being a serious confidential thing, you move that out as well and tell everyone to shut up in the other channel about discussing kind of really private things. The advantage of using something like Slack or Teams, has anyone had to write up a post-incident report or write up afterwards? It's really hard to remember how things happened unless you've got Slack or Teams, and then all the dates and times are in there telling you when someone said something, when you found it out. It makes it much easier as a record. So things like Teams, Slack, we had to tell people, please don't do a huddle. Please use a Slack call, because Slack had brought in huddles, which all the developers love because it's just like water cooler type thing. But it doesn't tell you when it started, who was in it, and all the audit information you need. So we actually had to say, please do proper calls so we can find out who was in the call and things like that. And you are trying to keep some people separate. One of the people you tend to keep out of these discussions at the start is anyone on the board at C-level, because they will be more panicky. So try and not tell them at the start until you've got something that is useful to tell them, is my advice. Keep it to, probably it's one level down from C who are going to deal with an incident anyway, unless it's super serious. And engineering contact is that buffer. It's that person who's going to talk to the rest of the company, whether that's someone in support or a platform engineer or a senior developer. It'll be someone like that who deals with it, or a head of engineering, because they'll be able to talk to the business in business terms while talking to the developers in the techie terms. And especially, you want to know what your commercial team think are going to be the impacts on your customers. So who are the customers who are going to be worst affected and things like that. Telling people outside the organization, you have already got all the templates ready to go. If you've got a plan, they're all ready. If you've got a status page, that's really good. Update that. We didn't have one at Free Market. We were hesitant about whether what's the one that Atlassian do that's a status service? Does anyone remember? Oh, there's some service that Atlassian provide to do status, and it's a status page with endpoints on and stuff. One of the things we always said, we were an Azure shop. We said, if we need to do our own status page, we need to get an AWS subscription. Because if we're on Azure, you better have your status page not on Azure. Because one of the faults you're looking for is Azure's gone down. Right? So, and if it starts being long running, you might have to do a technical advisory. So that's a template where you're in the middle, there's a paragraph where you're going to explain what's going wrong, what's it affecting, and give some idea of what's happening. Normally, if the incident's going to last under about 2 hours, you'll get away with not doing that, to be honest. And have something that says, yay, it's all fixed. Like, that's just as important as the one that you send out at the start saying it's all broken. So it's really nice to get it out. As soon as it's fixed and you know you're okay, send it out, tell the customers the good news. Afterwards, you might be asked for this thing called a post-incident report. And that is what happened, who was involved, what systems. You then have to work out whether you're going to have to tell someone you've lost data or had data compromised. You're going to have to tell the regulators, financial services and health services in America for HIPAA. And you want to deliver an incident report to affected customers. And you want to be open as honest as possible. And this is a really good one. You might consider informing customers who haven't been affected. Right? Now, one of the examples of this at Huddle, was we had a really nasty bug where an authorization code, as someone logged in, could accidentally pick up someone else's authorization code as they logged in, if they logged in within 50 milliseconds, in certain circumstances. One of the circumstances it happened in was a BBC journalist, because the BBC used Huddle, logging in and seeing KPMG France's homepage and dashboard with all the file listings, right? And one of the people said, he rang us up and said he's going to do a report on this. Isn't he nasty? No, he's a journalist. What do you expect him to do if he logs in as a BBC user and sees financial information from an auditor put in front of him? So immediately, obviously, we've got about 4 hours before he's going to do the story. So he gave us a time, genuinely gave us time to work out what was happening. Went in, we found a singleton that was holding this token. That's why it was getting reused between sessions if you happen to be on the same server within 50 milliseconds. Forgive me. And at that point, there's a discussion between head of development, head of engineering, the chief architect, who was Ian Cooper, and we're about 50% of us wanted to tell the world what had happened, tell them exactly how it happened, tell us how we fixed it, and point out that we've analyzed all our records, which we did, found out the 10 people it could have affected, and then checked whether those 10 logins had ever accessed documents and downloaded confidential information, and they hadn't. So we could prove it, because we audit all that kind of thing. So we went ahead and told people, because the 50% of us somehow won this argument, we got a great write-up in, like, from a professor of security saying they're really honest. They've said about how it happened. They've said how they fixed it. This is a really common thing that could happen in any language. We then went to the Home Office, who have documents, and we told them this had happened. It hadn't happened to them. We've checked. None of your documents were. And we went to around all the big clients we had, and they were so happy. Not that, well, they're obviously not happy our system did this wrong thing. What they were happy is we could prove there were no ill effects. We've proved we've remedied it, and we were open about what had happened. That's what gets you repeat customers who keep using you when you're honest. I can't remember, it was either Auth0 or OpenID. One of the security companies lied that they had a flaw for a week and then finally admitted it. Now, that's a bad thing for someone who handles your security in 2FA to do. So don't do that. So at the end of all this about incidents, I'm going to get onto CrowdStrike, which is the juicy bit of this. So have plan A, or a plan, don't care. And it's just have all that stuff ready. No one's going to panic. And the really nice bit, if you have this plan, and you are using it in quite a few incidents that are minor and don't really matter, then when the major one hits, everyone's ready, everyone knows what to do, no one panics. So it's really cool. And just be honest to customers, they really like it. So we're going to move on to major incidents you all know about. Marks and Spencer, remember this? Right? So they stopped taking online orders. It took them, like, was it 5 months before you could click and collect again at the stores? Something like that. I mean, really vital. When I first gave this talk, I was giving it in Oslo, and I was trying to explain to, how can you explain to Norwegians how important Marks and Spencers might be, right, as a concept, right? And the answer is that 1/4 of all underwear sold in the UK is sold by Marks and Spencers. So this outage stopped people buying underwear, right? That's how serious it was, right? You couldn't get it delivered. You had to go to a store to get your bras, socks, boxer shorts, okay? Interestingly, Marks and Spencer got a warning, got ransom notes, and carried on trying to work and shut down the access. And Co-op went, we'll just pull the plug. That was it. They switched everything off. So they had a completely different view. It's almost the same cost, virtually. However, I suspect the people in the Co-op were less stressed than the people in M&S while they were trying to fix this and trying to do it afterwards to work out what had gone. So if I was them, I'd go with Co-op. I'd have gone with pull the plug, then work out what's happening. Because if you don't know what's happening, the safest thing to do is just shut down your systems. Then, September, same year, Jaguar Land Rover got hacked. Remember that one? You couldn't buy a part for a Land Rover. Even my 40-year-old one was starting to run out of parts. They reckon it cost over 2 billion. 2 billion pounds. That actually caused our GDP to drop, right? Genuinely caused the GDP to shrink in the UK, that hack for Jaguar. And half of it was suppliers, not Jaguar itself. The suppliers were being affected. The government was having to step in and bail stuff out, right, in order to keep them going, because it's the biggest car maker we have left. So at the same time, and this is quite cool because I was chatting to somewhere in Europe, EU baggage check systems went. So you couldn't actually get your bags at airports. And that was an attack on system from Collins Aerospace. So, you know, people flying from Dublin couldn't get their bags for a few days, you know. Or rather, they were piling up in big heaps in, you know, next to the carousels and having dealt with really manually. So those things happen. And I was giving this in Techorama in Utrecht. And 1 week beforehand, AWS had an issue. This was last October. Is anyone on AWS? Did anyone experience the effects of this? If you had anything in the US, it was gone. Right, that was pretty much it. So if you have AWS stuff in the US, and we did at Huddle, we all know that the region 1 is East Virginia. It's the oldest bit of AWS. It's the most creaky. It's the most prone to failure. It's also where they have all their single plane, control plane stuff. It's the stuff where they only have it in one place. If it goes for the whole of AWS. There's no redundancy. Do not crow about Azure not being the same, because if you have a problem with Entra ID or front door in Azure, you have it in the world, virtually. So there is only one Entra ID. There's only one front door. If a region shuts, if a front door has a problem, you are not getting into multiple regions in the world. And by the way, that means not getting into the portal, not just your applications. So this is where it's not just about malware. It's not just about hacking these incidents. They can be just DNS. It's always DNS, isn't it? Cloudflare going down normally takes out a good chunk of the internet. But what about CrowdStrike? So what was CrowdStrike? Well, the technical details are that CrowdStrike decided to do an update patch. And basically, they'd released new software, but they gave it an old file. And the new software expected 21 array items, and the old file had 20 array items. And it was written in C++, and it ran in kernel mode. It ran in the lowest level, the highest privilege, lowest level on Windows, and when it went for the 21st item, it had an out-of-memory exception and blue-screened your box. That was it. By the way, this update was only available for 1 hour, 20 minutes, less than 1 hour and 20 minutes. You had to be running a certain one, and it would pull down this new software, reboot, reinitialize the software. It failed the file, blue-screened your machine. So the initial solution was when it reboots, hit the space bar, hit a function key, start manually going in, which is really crap if you've got headless servers in the cloud. Right? So it turned out that if you keep rebooting and keep rebooting and keep rebooting, occasionally it managed to get the update before it tried to pull in the data file, and it would repatch the machine, but it was quite busy at that point because they're all rebooting trying to get to the update server. So it did kind of resolve itself a bit. Funniest bit, Hungarian Grand Prix was that weekend. It happened on a Thursday or something, or Friday, can't remember. And guess what? The Mercedes F1 team is sponsored by CrowdStrike, and their machines have installed CrowdStrike, and their machines on the pit wall did the famous blue screen of death, which is what you saw them looking at going, ugh. Fortunately, they fixed it before they started the first practice, or the second practice on the Friday. Interestingly, the Port of Dover, so this is a Channel 4 program that did life at Dover. They had the same problem, and that meant no CCTV cameras were able to be looked at. And that control tower manages all the people going into that port, all the lorries. It was an absolute nightmare for them because they haven't done manual handling of that traffic for a long time. So it really affected quite a lot. But how is CrowdStrike for a free market, this FX provider? Well, this is where you could be glib. We don't use CrowdStrike. It's not on any of our systems. Why do we care? It's in Azure, but Azure, Microsoft are fixing anything like that. So it's okay, isn't it? We're okay. We haven't got CrowdStrike. Yeah, but we use loads of other people to do our software, to do our platform that we hook into. People who transfer money, banks. We have compliance checks. We have finance software. We have HR software. We have SMS sending from Twilio. How would that affect us? Because they could have CrowdStrike affecting them. So an incident, an important concept here is incident isn't about your software. It's about every other person you rely on and what's happening. So what happens on the day? So we're at 7:30. The most important thing you do at the start of the day is make a pot of tea. It genuinely is my teapot that I have at home, and I will go through 3 teapots a day of this. Given it was a Friday, I might have gone for a green mint tea, but Monday is normally vanilla from T2, a company called T2, Australian. It's really boring that I can actually name the tea that I would use on every day of the week, but there you are. It does calm you down and give you a chance to do something relaxing. But I start seeing some signal messages. So there's some guys in Australia who I know on Signal. They are Mish Manners, Amy, who's doing a talk here, who's going around with her little kid, and Aaron Powell. And they're all starting to talk because their airports are stopping working in Australia. Right? So I'm seeing this, and I go, ooh, BBC News channel's definitely talking about it. I'll go to Sky News. Oh, it's off air. Sky News went completely blank for like 4 hours because they had CrowdStrike and all their equipment to broadcast, including the desks where they mix the video, is all based on Windows. It all went. That was it. They lost the whole lot. They couldn't edit anything. They couldn't broadcast. Eventually, it looked like they'd kind of broadcast from a broom cupboard with one camera, doing a kind of web link. So the conclusion from all this, by the way, I did ask them if it's okay to put their images and their names up, and they were okay with it. So this has been cleared with GDPR type permissions. It's possibly in Azure, but it's more likely CrowdStrike was what it came to, because everyone at first thought it was an Azure problem. So I'm now at 7:55 going into Slack and saying, I think we're about to have an incident. So I've already started saying to people, I think there's quite a major incident coming, which means that I've got to start thinking about activating the incident plan. So I've started to fill out my little Slack workflow. I use the same one that everyone else uses to report it, so it comes out in the same format. I actually created an incident channel fairly fast on the back of this, knowing that we had a problem, and I started to direct message people who I knew we were going to need. The platform, the incident manager would be our senior platform support, our senior platform engineer. If they hadn't talked back to me, I would have got them on WhatsApp or SMS them or just phoned them like a normal phone and talked to them about it. I sanity checked that we were okay, and we used mainly PaaS, platform as a service. We had a handful of VMs, and VMs seemed to be the worst thing in this whole issue. We only used them for connecting to outside sources, to do VPNs, and we didn't have any malware protection, so we weren't going to CrowdStrike on it. And we started a few high-level investigations I was doing, going, yeah, we use Zero, and Zero's affected. And I think Octopus deployers got hit and were concerned about GitHub as well at the time, because people were reporting stuff on social media. So 10 minutes later, I'm calling an incident. That's it. There's a channel. Everyone can now talk about it. So we're going to have an incident plan. Slack, in it goes, separate channel. Everyone gets invited, so finance, compliance, all those guys got in. No C-levels, as I said, keep them out for a bit because they don't need to know until we've got a context, till we understand what we're dealing with. All the information I'd discovered, I went and posted into the channel, so no one was going to have to repeat all that research and going, here's what Xero is saying. If I found out that this customer's talking about it, this supplier, here's the page that they've got information on. And we've now started to have our timeline that's going to be important for when I write this presentation. No, for when I write the post-incident report. Interestingly, someone asked from the audience, when you saw this happen, did you think this will make a good talk? No, that wasn't the thought I had 10 minutes into an incident. This will be a cracking talk for a conference. No, it took about 3 weeks. And I went, that'll be a cracking talk for a conference. Because it's an example of how it really happens. So then you're identifying key systems. It's interesting what key systems are, you see. So you think about it, we've got accounting software, we're doing expenses, we've got payment runs, payroll, things like that. This is where, by the way, what's a critical system might vary depending on what time of the month it is. Like if you're not doing salary runs, who cares if for next week you can't do a salary run if it's the middle of a month and you don't do salary runs in the middle of a month. So you're not going to stop anyone paying their mortgage. That's the important thing to understand as a developer. It's really critical you pay salaries because people's mortgages get based on when they're paid. So you're putting people out of their house if you're not careful. So compliance, banking operations, sales. So you're going through all of this. Engineering are thinking about what have we got. So you're thinking this is quite a lot to think about. So the interesting bit is we had recently had to do stuff for the Central Bank of Ireland because there is something called DORA. DORA is not a cute little girl who goes around the world finding things. Neither is it metrics to do with how fast you process stories and deliver, although it is. But in this case, it's the Digital Operation Resilience Act. In the UK, we have the Operation Resilience tests that the FCA do. And this is basically, they believe, and it's not an outrageous belief, that banks should have analyzed all their systems and all their software for resilience such that you are never stopped from taking the money you legitimately have in your bank account out just because of an IT failure. That's quite a nice thing to do, isn't it? In Europe. God knows what they do in the US. Don't care. Right? So it's a Europe thing. So we'd actually gone through and worked out what our critical systems were, what our secondary systems were, and tertiary systems, because we had to do this for this regulation. This was a gold mine. We immediately could send people off going, you need to check this, you need to check this, and you get people to check the most important systems first. And it's strange what you think are critical, right? It's only when you really think about these things. So banking partners are really important, and things like the Bank of England, because the money goes through there, and Pay UK, who do faster payments and things like that. Transaction monitoring, we can't pay anyone. We can't send money out unless we can prove it's not going to a dictator or a terrorist or whatever it is, if someone doing fraud. SMS sending is critical because you can't log in without 2FA. And loads of the customers still use SMS because they don't like authenticator apps. They're mad, but that's the way it is. So if we don't have SMS, people can't log into our system. So Twilio sending SMS is now a primary critical system for us. And accounting software and payroll, because if we can't pay bills, we might be in trouble. Secondary systems, new customers. We were a B2B organization. New customers take weeks to get on board because you're doing fraud and compliance checks. We're not consumers, so new customers, if we can't do them for a day, it's fine. But we want it to work. And then you're thinking about your dev systems. So Octopus Deploy, what if that went down? What if the bug that hits Octopus Deploy has also hit our software and we need to do a release, but we can't release because we can't deploy it? So that's a bit of an issue as well. But It's unlikely that something that affects Octopus is affecting you identically, and you need a hot fix, and you can't do it within a... So you've really got to go, that's a secondary item. Does it matter that you can't put a ticket in Jira to say, hey, I'm fixing this hot fix? You can hold off on that, things like that. Other things like address lookup are really down the list. So until you've sorted the critical, you don't move to secondary. Until you've done the secondary, you don't move to tertiary. I've told everyone, so I realised the head of finance is on holiday and has not responded to any messages. So that's on me. So, and that's definitely me because there's no hair on that head. So, or very little. So we then tell the deputy head of finance to start checking with Xero and everyone that the account system is going to work. We've got our first draft of customer communications circulated for revisions. This means in little over an hour since I really first knew this happened, and I was the first person in the company to find out, we have the emails ready to send to customers. And it's before most of them get into the office and start working, or it's at the start of their day. So we can tell people, as they start their day, customers, what's happening, and that we are on it, and we have checked a load of stuff, and we know we're okay. And we can do that because we already have them, and we're just fiddling with them slightly. So marketing, check it, write it up. Engineering say we think it's this. Marketing, word it. Compliance, head of sales and head of compliance send it out. Compliance is important because anything we say in that email, if it implicates us that we would have to tell a regulatory body, compliance are quite keen to know what's in the email, because they'd rather not have to go through the process of writing up a report to a regulatory body. So, and engineers are explicitly asked not to reply to customers directly. So it's really hard because you want to be helpful, right? You want to tell people, yeah, we think it's this in the API, or we think it's this, but the best thing to do is not tell people and just go, we're working on it, you'll get status emails, you'll get alerts coming through very soon. We then conclude, within 90 minutes, only one third-party service is still affected. Octopus rebuilt their VMs, so did GitHub. Xero sorted it out by about 10 in the morning anyway, but they were on their way to fixing it. We knew they were fixing it. So we have one bank, I think, one banking partner. So we had one banking partner that had a degraded service, and it was our least used banking partner, and there was only 4 customers who regularly used them. So we could tell those 4 customers they won't be able to do those sorts of payments today, and it's the bank that we're waiting to come back online. Not us, we could do it, but the banks got the problem. Yeah, Octopus deployed, all sorted, Xero had sorted, and Microsoft and our IT partner had resolved everything by 12 noon. It had all been sorted. So that was happy, smiley. Which means by 9:15, we can tell people that we are not affected. We've talked to the 4 customers or whatever who use that one bank, that they'll have an issue, and everyone else can be told it's all okay. So what we're basically saying is, you don't need to worry about us, because we might be one of your critical suppliers. Keep going around the rest of your critical suppliers, because that's what they're going to be doing at that point. We didn't even talk to our CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, because he was a part-time CISO, because we didn't want to bother him, because we were on it, and we knew what we were doing, because he was having to deal with other customers who were having similar issues. So it's really cool. So the C-levels only got told about 8:45, when we knew exactly where we were, that they didn't need to worry about it, that if any shareholders asked, they can talk to the shareholders and say we're not affected. So, and the leadership team, which included all the C-levels and board members, happens at 9:30 every day. By then, they can talk about it, and we can give them a full info on it all. So, and at no point, by the way, did anyone panic, worry, get stressed. Everyone just started doing what they were expected to do and just went through it all. So what did we have in our post-incident report? Check for people being on holiday using the HR system and calendars, right? And if people don't respond within 5 minutes, remember I said that if my support engineer and platform engineer hadn't responded, I would have got hold of them, because I know they're kind of almost direct reports, but I didn't do it for the other heads, and you should have been doing it for everyone. If you don't have to do an analysis of all your critical systems because you don't have a regulatory requirement, still do it. At least do it inside the engineering department, because it's a really handy thing to have, because it made life very easy. The thing we noticed was, although we had numbers or emails for suppliers, we didn't necessarily have full contact details, so we started asking for them from suppliers and make sure that we were okay. And remember I said about Co-op just pulling the plug when they had their ransomware? We checked that our logic we had that could just pull our database servers and redirect all traffic was still working. We had it, we'd never used it in anger, so within a week we tested that we could go to a static holding page and block access to our database servers and take them offline. And we did that as a practice. Now, at Free Market, every 6 months, we did a live disaster recovery on the live system to move it from processing everything in North Europe in Dublin to everything in West Europe in the Netherlands, and checked it was running for 2 hours and then moved it all back. And we did that every 6 months. So we were aware that we could definitely do that, but we needed to check this static holding page would work as well. So the takeaways, which really were from my original incident chat, was please have a plan. That's the key one here, is definitely have a plan and definitely rehearse it a bit. Like, if you have real incidents, use the whole of the plan. Don't try and shortcut it and go, this isn't really a big incident, so we'll do it slightly differently. Just do it as you would every time. If you do that, everyone's practiced it, everyone will be ready for it, it will make your life so much easier. Know who you're going to talk to. Have something prepared, because you don't want to write a random email. Remember, it could be 2 a.m. that you're trying to write this email. Don't do that. Just have one ready to go. And make sure you can record everything and it isn't on conference calls that you don't know who was in the room. If you're going to have calls like that, just type up summaries of what happened in the call and things like that. Be as open and honest as possible, because customers will appreciate it. So it's always cool that you could go to all our customers by 9, we're not affected, go and talk to your other suppliers. We're not going to be a problem today. So that's really cool. And the other one is clearly have a decent supply of tea or coffee during the entire process, because it will help. And that's it.